Something beautiful to me about people who were abused as kids is that the desire for love and tenderness stays alive in us, even when other people leave us, even when we piece together the thinnest little bits of relationships out of whatever happens to be available. We agree to these kind of time filler relationships, and we try to play it cool when the emptiness inside of those relationships becomes too obvious to avoid. And still we feel love, and we want to be loved. There's an urge in hurt people who pretend to be okay in these relationships to act like the crumbs they're getting are enough. They should be enough, right? Have you done this? When you get treated like you're not important, do you turn against yourself and wonder, is it just me? Am I expecting too much? Am I too needy? Am I unreasonable? Am I just going to get abandoned again if I say something? That's the voice of the trauma in you. The real feeling under that is not needy. It's a natural tendency toward love. And you might settle for less, but if you're feeling that sense of injustice in your heart, that when you opened your life to this other person, you deserved something better than casual treatment. Now, it's true, maybe you didn't choose well or you didn't set boundaries the way an untraumatized person might have done it. But it's the most beautiful part of you that craves that love. It keeps coming back like a dandelion through the crack in the sidewalk. And it comes back because no matter what happened to you in the past, no matter how much this has warped your path and squashed your expectations, you were made to be loved. And accepting crumbs might have been how you survived. But now I want to help you change those terms. No more crumbs. And I want to talk about that today. All right. So my letter is from a woman I'll call Celine. And she writes, "Hi, Anna. Please, can you help me decide whether I'm in a healthy relationship or not? Because I can see strong arguments for both. I have CPTSD from childhood, during which I was bought and sold for sex. Most of the time was spent at parents' homes and going to school, but then sometimes I spent time away, up to 3 months abroad with abusers. This has left me with lots of self-esteem, trust, and shame issues, as well as issues around money. It might be relevant that to this day, I'm 49, she says, I still can't decide if my parents are evil or just weak and victimized. I know they treated me very badly." I'm circling a couple things with my fairy pencil because I'm going to read through. I'm going to come back to some key points because I think I can help you with this, Celine. Okay. 3 years ago, I moved to a new place. I had a responsible job working long hours in a different town, so I didn't get to know many of my neighbors beyond a surface level. The man who is now my boyfriend, I'll call him Anthony, is my next door neighbor. I first saw Anthony when I was struggling outside with something as I was moving in 3 years ago, and we caught each other's eye through his kitchen window. He went away. A different neighbor saw me struggling and came and helped. I don't know if it was that Anthony didn't notice I was stuck or if he chose not to help. When I asked him about it, he didn't seem to remember. Anthony and I had a drink together one night, and although I liked him, it didn't lead to anything, and anyway, I was too busy with my job to think about pursuing a relationship. We finally got together 8 months ago after my job came to an end in difficult circumstances. It was summer. I started spending a lot of time outdoors in my garden, and he was working outside on his windows, and I felt there was a very strong sexual attraction. I hadn't been with a man for 16 years, and I didn't think I'd ever want to again, so it was a wonderful surprise for me to find I could still feel this way. We had a drink together outside a few times and chatted. He invited me around to his place for dinner one evening, and he cooked a nice meal. I asked him if it was a date, and he said no. I invited him back to my place for dinner a couple of weeks later. I was flirting pretty hard, but he didn't make any move. At the end of the night, I asked him why he hadn't, and that's when he finally kissed me for the first time. The next time we met, we did a lot of kissing. I wanted to take it further, but I was scared about how I'd react if we did. This went on for a couple of weeks until I was wondering why he hadn't taken the next step. When he finally made a move, I panicked and said we hadn't even been out on a date. He said we'd go out on a date, and we did, immediately. We walked to the closest restaurant, a place I know now he doesn't even like. We had dinner. At times he seemed completely disinterested in me, even bored. When the bill came, I had my card ready to pay my half, but he didn't reach for his and allowed me to pay. I feel uncomfortable about this. Not least because I just lost my job, but I didn't say anything. We went back to his place and had sex. The sex was great. He was gentle and considerate, and he still wanted to hang out with me the next day. He told me he'd liked me since he first met me, but thought I was unobtainable. We'd been dating ever since. Over the 8 months, he's taken me to meet his parents 3 times and most of his friends many times. After we'd been dating for about 6 weeks, he told me his ex-girlfriend had texted him and told him to let me know they are still friends. Secretly, I hated this at once, but forced myself to focus on the fact that I'm still friends with 2 of my exes and don't have any feelings for them, and why should that be any different for him? At our age, we all have baggage. They've been split up for 4 years. One day, when we were out walking, he got a text and told me, although I hadn't asked, that his ex had his record player and wanted him to collect it. Around 3 months later, he received another text and told me the exact same words. I asked about this, and he didn't really respond. A few days later, he took me with him to his ex to collect the record player, but he didn't tell her I was coming and didn't invite me out of the car and parked up the street so we didn't even see each other, and I wondered if the trip was to cover up a lie. About 4 months into our relationship, while he was away, he texted me that he loved me, but when he returned home and I asked him about it, he was quite gruff and said he'd already told me how he felt. Since then, he has told me again 3 times, but only one of those was without me saying it first. Sometimes he's so loving and tender with me, but sometimes he seems distant, almost cold. Then I noticed his ex was texting him a lot. His phone was constantly going while we were together, and he started setting it to silent. When I caught sight of him reading the texts, I saw they were very, very long. When we spoke about it, I said I understood they were still friends, and he said, when I say we're friends, we lived together, and didn't finish the sentence. I took it to mean that he cared about her because she has serious mental health issues and no friends. Then he accepted a job from her. He's a builder, which meant he'd be working at her house for 4 days. I said I didn't feel comfortable about him doing that, but he said it was only for the money. My problem really started the other day when it was Anthony's birthday. We were talking about his plans, and he said it was awkward for him to have to act in a cool manner towards people because I might not be okay with them. And I said if he wanted to invite her along with the group, I would be okay with that. He said he would, but he didn't think she'd come. She came. She stayed out with us all night. We went back to friend's house for drinks afterwards. She was the life and soul of the party, buying shots and charming everyone. I approached her and we chatted, and she said Anthony had only ever dated one other girl before her, and she felt strange and bad seeing him with me. When she left, she shared a taxi with a single friend of his she'd met that evening. I was relieved when she left, but I felt pleased that I'd handled it without losing my center. One of Anthony's friends asked him about her leaving with a mate, saying, "How would you feel if those 2 got together?" And Anthony, who was drunk, replied very slowly and decisively, "I loved her, and I still do love her as a person." There was a bit of a stunned silence in the room. I tried to make light of it and asked if he got cut off mid-sentence, and another friend tried to help with that, but Anthony said no. I didn't want to make a fuss in front of his friends or ruin his birthday, so I said nothing. The next day he was hungover, and it still didn't seem like a good time to ask him about it, but we met outside, and I couldn't hide that I was upset. I told him, "You're supposed to fall out of love with your ex before you start dating someone again." He just shook his head and said no, that I was wrong, that it's me, and he hugged me. And I asked him if he's with me because she is very challenging and I'm very passive and eager to please. And he said no, but he didn't explain. I was desperate to be confronted, and I allowed myself to be calmed by him, but I don't think it really addressed my issue. It feels like his heart is hers. He's always stumbled over saying that he loves me, but when he said it about her, he was full of calm conviction. She seems like a much better match for him, as I'm still signed off at work and have to have no financial success or family or many friends. Am I being too needy about this? Is it okay if he loves us both? I don't want to sabotage something good, but I also don't want to settle for a half love. And I don't know which one this is. Celine. Okay, Celine, I gotcha. Let's go through a couple things you told me in your letter. I won't read the whole thing, but let me just go to some key points. So first of all, bought and sold. It's interesting to me how you said this so matter-of-factly, and that sometimes you were going to school and being at home with your parents, and then sometimes you go to some foreign country for a few months to be trafficked. And yes, of course you have self-esteem, trust, and shame issues and money issues. Boy, you just said that so effortlessly and like, yes, there's the background. And I know what it is to sort of compartmentalize something like that just so you can get on with the story and not be defined by it. So I'm proud of you to not be defined by it. But oh my gosh, what a background. What struck me is that you said, to this day, you can't decide if your parents are evil or just weak and victimized. So if they were trafficking you, honey, they're not victims. They are not the victims. I don't think any person is really evil, but they go to an evil place and they do evil things and they sometimes never get out of it. And since you're in confusion about this, it sounds like they're either gone or they certainly never took responsibility for what they did to you, which is one of the gravest abuses you could possibly do to another person, and by your own parents. So I'm really sorry that happened. And I'm going to go ahead and set that aside and just let that be an understanding of why, just like with so many of us, some of this stuff is hard for you to detect and navigate, okay? So 3 years ago, you moved into a new place. You worked all the time. You didn't really know your neighbors, but you were struggling outside once with something that was very heavy. And this guy, Anthony, who's now your boyfriend, saw you and just took off. And sometimes I think that the red flag shows up in the first second. It was red flag at first sight, right? He saw you struggling and he took off. And another neighbor helped you, but who'd you get together with? The guy who took off. And I just see that, you were primed to be able to tolerate that and question only if maybe you're being too hard on people when they treat you that way, okay? So I would say flat out, if a guy sees you struggling with something heavy and just walks away, that would be a red flag. No relationship there. That's not who you want to be with. And not just because of gender, like anybody, what a partnership is showing up in that sort of spirit of helpfulness and support towards another person. And when they struggle, that's why two people are better than one, because individual struggles really need a friend sometimes. So he showed you who he was with that. But as you say, he said he didn't even remember. I wonder. That also kind of echoes what we heard from him later on in your story. I don't know. I'm unaware. I'm just like this hapless guy just bumbling along. I don't know what's happening. So, all right. So he's your next door neighbor, always complicated. And you had a drink together one night and you liked him, but it didn't lead to anything and you were busy and you didn't want to pursue a relationship. But finally, got together 8 months ago after your job ended, so you weren't so busy, and it was summer, and you were outdoors in your garden. He was working outside. Kind of sounds like one of those movies, And then attraction blossomed, and yes, that's a happy thing. You still get attracted, and that's wonderful. That's life springing eternal in you. It comes back. So that's a good thing. That force of nature in you, that's a good thing. You had a drink together outside a few times and chatted. So I'm just going to comment, like, it is so normal for people to have drinks together, right? But if you have CPTSD and if you have trouble with boundaries, I would just suggest don't drink. Don't drink on dates, or maybe don't drink at all. The thing about alcohol is it distorts your perception and lowers your inhibitions, which is what CPTSD already does. So CPTSD plus alcohol equals CPTSD behaviors. That's what I'm saying. If drinking is not normally a problem for you and you're in a very safe situation with people you trust and there's no like emotional landmines around you, having drinks together with people is not a problem. But doing it on a date, doing it when you like somebody, is basically just saying, I don't want these horrible inhibitions and boundaries and stuff. I don't want them. I just want the wind to blow where it blows and see where it goes. And I'm letting go here. And I know a lot of people, especially you heavy drinkers out there, are going to give me pushback on that, but it's true. So I didn't drink for 8 years. I'm not an alcoholic, but I didn't drink for 8 years. It started when I quit smoking cigarettes. I knew that I would have to do that. I realized what a huge difference it was making in my ability to make conscious choices in my life, to stay out of sick relationships. And I loved it. And I stayed not drinking until my kids were, I don't know, in school, basically. It was, I ended up having, alcohol-free pregnancies. There were so many things. No cigs, no alcohol, yay me, right? I felt really good about that. And then I reintroduced it and it wasn't a problem, and it's something I hardly ever do. To this day, the way my CPTSD and my wounds interact with drinking is if I'm already sad about something, it's going to make me more sad. And I know some people have kind of a different response to it, like it lifts sadness or it heals depression. Not me. If I'm depressed, I'm going down, so I got to stay away from it. It's only for super safe, happy times and not very much. That's me. Okay. So you got together, you had drinks, you went to his place, a couple later your place, you were flirting. You asked him, like, what's going on? You're not making a move. And then finally he kissed you. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that as a beginning of a relationship. It's just that now that we know where it went, we can sort of see that he was planting the flag of somebody who's like not taking responsibility for initiating a relationship. If he had actually pursued you, asked you out, paid for your dinner, all of that stuff, it would be him volunteering for that role in your life. But the dates, it was always you kind of having to gently, I don't think you overdid it at all. I'm proud of you for asking questions, but you always had to ask, is this a date? You had to put your credit card down. So you were sort of facilitating this thing toward dating, and it seems like he didn't have the drive or motivation to kind of push that forward. And he let you into his life, he did. But he didn't do that crucial thing. And most people need that. I certainly have found in men, they need to have a piece of the relationship early on that they have to reach for it, that activates their ability to fall in love. And if they don't get that, it seems very likely that they're going to fall in love. And I've had so many opportunities to test my hypothesis, okay? So then you got together, there was a whole bunch of kissing, but he still didn't advance it towards sex, and you wondered if something was wrong. You kind of thought, it would be his role to sort of go, come on, let's take it to the next level. And he didn't. And I hear you about that, and that it does indicate something. There's something he's not telling you about why he's holding back. But I would just say for one reason or another, he didn't feel right about it, or he would have. So then when he finally did make a move, you panicked. You said, wait, we haven't even been out on a date. And so this is like the classic relationship malaise of our time. There's a whole pattern here. This happens to so many people, but there you are. You've been seeing somebody a lot. You've been making out for weeks. It's time for it to go to the next level in your mind, and yet you've never been on a date. Like, what is up with that? I just want to go in and put in a big advocation. I want to say, go on dates. Be somebody who requires being courted. Be on somebody who goes on dates. See, if you take my dating course, this is where it starts. You have to write down, what do you want? And then I help you set up a slow path of structured dating so that you can be open and receptive to what it is you actually want, and speak up for what you want and be honest and open about it, but not do it so fast, not try to manufacture this great relationship out of somebody you barely know. People without trauma do that all the time. We do it too, but for us, the consequences are so terrible because we lose our boundaries so easily because of the attachment wound, and then because of the abandonment wounds. Once we find ourselves in some sort of, crap relationship, we can't leave. We won't leave. We'll do anything to make it work. We'll continue to dumb ourselves down, stop having standards, blame ourselves. We'll do all that stuff so that we don't have to face the end. So many of us do that. There's no shame in it. It's just that when you're ready to be happy, it's time to stop doing that. So when you said we need a date, he said, great, we'll go on a date. And you walked right out to a restaurant that he didn't even like he couldn't even be bothered to do something he would enjoy. It was like, here's your date. And you paid for it. And there was something icky in that. That didn't feel good to me. You put your card out. You thought it would be Dutch. I don't even recommend you do that. A lot of people will say I'm not feminist. I'm totally feminist. I'm so feminist that I don't like getting jerked around by men. And I allow them, if they want to go on a date, to pay. And I wouldn't pay for a first date with a guy. I just wouldn't. And when I stopped doing that, things totally changed in my dating life. It sends a strong signal. If you have a pattern of compromising yourself, of having to do all the work, having to ask all the questions, just do something new for yourself, and just don't do that. Don't ask guys out, don't pay. Just let them come to you. Let them demonstrate to you that they would do that for you. Let them show you what their intentions are by that ritualized action. There's nothing old-fashioned about that. It's totally lovely to have somebody take you out to dinner. Very nice. And of course, you don't owe them anything. For all the guys who are going to go, oh, well, women just, take advantage and want the dinner. It's not true. It's not true. It's called courtship. It's a good thing. It's a good thing, and we kind of lost it in the sea of everything else going on, and we can bring it back for ourselves without having to change other people. And I promise you, when you hold yourself in that position of a self-respecting person who will date but needs to be asked, needs to be treated properly, then you will be asked and treated properly. Don't even worry, okay? You're going to repel people who would only give you something less than that. You're going to shine to people who would give you something more than that, all right? That's how it works. So you had the dinner, you had sex, you say it was great, and he wanted to hang out with you the next day. And then he told you something that sounds really manipulative in light of what we know about him. He said he'd liked you since he first met you, but thought you were unobtainable. So, okay, maybe that's true, but that doesn't seem why he was so reluctant to get involved with you. I think it's better explained by his entanglement with his ex. That's what somebody who is torn up inside does. They feel lonely. They might not want to be with some ex, but they feel lonely and they want to have a companion, but they really can't give themselves. They're not emotionally available. They're not emotionally available to the ex or to you. And that's a limbo that people can live in for a long time. I've done it. I think it's really a common CPTSD thing. I don't know if he has CPTSD. It's not really important here. It's just that, yeah, he thought you were unobtainable. I appreciate that he introduced you to his parents and his friends often. That's cool. That means he was open to you, but not emotionally, right? So, okay, so one of the rationales we could have is he has an avoidant personality and it's just not his style, but he does feel that way about you. That's certainly possible, but avoidant people are very difficult to be with. I wouldn't recommend it unless they're really aware that it affects you, aware that it's a style. They're working on meeting you halfway. That is a good thing to do. You might have a more anxious attachment style where you're always trying to check and take the temperature and do they like me? And he's more trying to hold it back here. So I'll tell you a secret. You can still have a good relationship with an avoidant person, but as the person who's anxious and kind of chasing after them, it's better to stop chasing because it's the chase on them that makes them feel anxious. It makes them feel like they have to pull away. So sometimes all the questions make them pull away. But in your telling of this, you barely ever asked him anything. I think that your questions and your timing of questions was important, minimal, true, real. So I back you up on that. If he couldn't deal with that, I just think he has a serious availability problem. I don't like that he was gruff with you about asking whether he loved you after the first time he told you, and he told you on the phone. So that's what it seems like. I noticed that his loving stuff happens from a distance, He got all weepy about the ex when she wasn't in the room, And then he got worried about your feelings when you said, I think that you belong with her, something's wrong here. Then he showed you. He told you he loved you when he was traveling. So that's what an avoidant person might do. They can express those feelings when there's a huge space between you, but day to day they can't. And this is so painful for somebody who's been abandoned and traumatized like you have. To be left in another country and abused while your parents just waited and, got money off of it. Oh, good Lord. That's just so bad. I could just see how it kind of your way that you survived that was to shut down the belief that that could be evil, to think that you don't deserve to be treated in a normal, vanilla way, either as a little girl or as a 49-year-old woman. That this is just vanilla. Vanilla is very good. And by vanilla, I mean just the customary, normal, cultural way that people go on a date or raise children. Right? I'm not going to keep going back to your childhood. It's too upsetting. It's too upsetting. But it's certainly, you can feel the damage coming up in the way you question your judgment here. And I just think you're doing amazing. One day you're out walking and he got a text and she said, come get your record player. 3 months later, he gets the same text. He said the same thing and you put that in italics. So I think you suspected he was lying. I guess benefit of the doubt, maybe he just didn't get the record player the first time. But what's coming through to me loud and clear is that this woman is trying to hook him in right now. And it's kind of working. But she's constantly manipulating and texting and she's emotionally upset and she needs him. And the record player, oh my gosh, it's still here, you have to get it. And then what he did was codependently not take you to meet her, not let her know you were there, make you have to deal with that, like he's afraid to set her off. So you had mentioned just very slightly here that she has some kind of emotional problems. So what is she, like a borderline who just is so charming and wonderful and nice and then just is going to kill herself or something? That's the impression I get. So it's easy to get held hostage by those people. But I guess on his birthday when he was drunk, and there it is, alcohol, and it will exaggerate all sorts of messy thoughts. So, I mean, who among us doesn't sometimes bump into an ex and feel nostalgic and go, oh gosh, I really love that person. Saying it out loud in front of you and all of his friends was totally sloppy and uncool and definitely another red flag. If you want to start your life again in the relationship department, I would invite you to set a new standard. End all your friendships with exes. Even if you don't have feelings for them, end those relationships and be prepared to meet somebody who also is not entangled with any exes. Those are ideal conditions. Very, very good for meeting somebody so that you can very quickly discern, like, is this person for me? Is this relationship what I'm looking for? And there's not just a whole bunch of side drama about other people and questions about that. The presence of exes means usually emotional unavailability. And whether it's somebody whose whose parent of their child is constantly at war with them, that might not be their fault right now, but it creates unavailability. It's like a whole thing you have to take on. It's a notorious relationship killer. Or if they have a whole bunch of friends, people they used to sleep with, and you're all supposed to be cool with it. I'm not cool with it. When I finally got honest with myself about that, I was just like, no, I'm totally not cool with that. And I was dishing it out, but I didn't like taking it. So that's what I changed in my life when I got ready to have a relationship for real, to stop all the crap relationships and prepare the way for the real thing, is I stopped having friends where there was any kind of vibe at all, anything that would cause my potential mate to feel jealous. And the man showed up. I'm now married to him. And one of the things he announced to me is that, and I wasn't even expecting this, I wasn't even very clear about it myself at the time. And he just said, something I'm going to do while we're dating is, just so you know, I'm not hanging out with exes. I'm not like hanging out with other women, having lunch with them or anything. I'm here to find out if you're the one for me. Oh, so direct, right? If you're the one for me. And I'm not going to clutter it up with a bunch of things that might make you feel jealous, because that's going to disrupt our process of figuring out if we're the real thing. So that was heavenly. I loved that. It didn't make us instantly get together. It was still like quite a process over several years. But I never had to deal with that. And to this day, I don't have to deal with it. And what a relief it is. And now I look around like it's so common in our culture to just be like, oh yeah, you're supposed to be friends with all these people. Now, sometimes there's a purpose to doing that because of children, usually. Children, perhaps an illness or something in an ex. So sometimes there's a purposeful reason to stay connected with them. But if it causes jealousy, just know you're going to pay the price in terms of emotional connection. And there it is. Okay. And you don't have to settle for that. So, so she was texting him, she was drawing him in. Then he agreed to do a job for her. And I don't know, I smell a rat. This little job she needed done, built for her, it just sounds like her trying to get him to hang around. It definitely does. And he said yes, and I wouldn't like it either. And I think at that point I might have been very clear, no way. But here we are. So then he had his birthday. Then he said he loved her. It does seem, yeah. Then she comes and she was so charming, right? And I'll just tell you something. If you ever are the ex and you come to the party of a man and his current partner, take a back seat. Don't be the life and soul of the party. That's totally inappropriate. You take a back seat. If you're an ex, man or woman, I don't care who you are, it is inappropriate to come in and try to steal the show. That is hurtful, manipulative behavior. Don't do it. So I'm not lecturing you. I'm really lecturing her, and she's not watching, but that is really lame. I feel for you. How awful you must have felt that whole time, just getting through it, muscling through. You said, okay, sure, honey. Blah. Okay. And he didn't think she came. I thought your language was so funny. He didn't think she'd come. She came. And she stayed out all night and everybody was drinking and it was so fun. And then what does she do? She takes off with his friend in a taxi. And by this time, I'm so like convinced that she's just there she's so manipulative. So she's trying to hook him and make him jealous about taking off with his friend. His chain was yanked. Surprise. You know, I almost don't even fault him for that part of it, but you know, he's been setting it up. So he was drunk and one of his friends said, how would you feel if they got together? Because it looked like they were. And he was stricken, right? He was stricken and he's like, I loved her. I always loved her. As a person, he tried to qualify, but we know what he's saying. His love has been activated just as she designed. And the reason he's not with her is what you mentioned here, and I believe it, is her emotional instability. It sounds like it was a drama shit show, and it ended 4 years ago, and she still is trying to hook him in, and he hasn't put boundaries around his life yet to move on from that, and he's ruining it with you. So here we are. So the next day he was hungover and you didn't think it was a good time to talk. I love your judgment. Not good to talk to a drunk person, maybe not even a hungover person. But you met outside and you couldn't hide that you were upset. And you know, when you're neighbors with somebody, yeah, what are you going to do, right? You have to like see everybody's comings and goings. And then when it doesn't work out, somebody's got to move. So these things happen. I happen to know. But it's really, really hard when it gets to this like painful point. So you asked if he was just with you because she was very challenging and you're passive and eager to please. And he said no. And you were desperate to be comforted and you allowed yourself to be calmed by him, but you don't think he didn't address the issue. And that sounds like his deal. He gives you just enough crumbs to go, no, it's fine. It's fine. It's you. But he doesn't come forward and go, I'm so sorry I did that. That must have been horrible for you. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm totally serious about you and I don't want you to have to feel jealous. That is what you needed to hear. And he also didn't go, listen, you know what? I'm just kind of here for convenience. So take it or leave it, which is what his actions are saying. He's there for convenience. You're there. He likes you well enough. He kind of loves you, but he's not in a place where he can give himself to you. I promise you, this thing with the ex is not going to work out, whatever happens. It's not going to work out. He's got emotional availability issues and you're with him, and it's so understandable that you would be drawn to somebody like that. Sometimes, and especially because you had been sort of avoiding relationships for so many years, sometimes the person who only has a little bit to give, well, we can only handle a little bit, so it seems like it will work. But it turns out that there is that little dandelion of hope in you, that you are capable of love and you would like to be loved. And I encourage you, Celine, to listen to that part of yourself and honor it. Honor that part of you. Let it come back. I know that it opens the door to a world of pain and problems, potentially. But this is your heart's desire talking to you, drawing you in. And with a little bit of structure and a little bit of conscious decision-making before you're in a relationship, you can follow a much different path, and it can be better than this. You're in a predicament now because you live there and you're going to see him. It sounds like, I know you're out of work right now, but it sounds like moving and going to a new place would be good and cutting ties with this person. It's progress. I don't want you to beat yourself up. You had a relationship that was a half relationship, but perhaps it's time to set your sights higher on the whole thing, just like real love. When we talk about trauma, we don't talk enough about this. The tendency in people who didn't get their emotional needs met when they were kids to form profound attachments to the idea of another person and to struggle to tell the difference between that idealized concept of that person and actual relationship. It's happened to a lot of us, and it's so sad. It sucks the soul out of you. So I first talked about this a couple months ago. I'll put a link to that video at the end of this one if you want to see it. But the word for this phenomenon is limerence. And ever since I talked about it, There's been a huge reaction here on my YouTube channel. So many people have struggled with this before. Limerence is the word for a kind of romantic infatuation or obsession with someone that usually does not involve a full actual relationship. Sometimes it's with someone you know, sometimes it's with a total stranger, like a celebrity or someone from your past who you once knew. But it takes over your mind, so much so that it can seem to your friends like you're not yourself anymore. It can seem crazy. And one of the key signs of it is that rather than being in a relationship with someone, you're thinking about them all the time, going over and over the little bits of contact you had, if you had any, what they said, what they did, what they posted, the dreams you had about them. Everywhere you go, you're searching for hidden meaning. Is it a sign that could possibly tell you that they actually love you, even though they're not in your life? So I'm going to be sharing some letters on this in the coming weeks. And the first one I'm going to do is from someone I'll call Elizabeth. And she writes, "Hi, Anna. My name's Elizabeth. I want to ask a question about an emotionally unavailable man I have interest in. It's more like an obsession," she says. "Let's call him Max. By the way, I should first say that he has a public image in his country. He's wealthy, so he's not trusting of any person because, as you might imagine, wealthy people are taken advantage of easily. Anyway, we knew each other through common friends, but never really got to know each other. There was no friendship between us. When I wanted to pursue a relationship with him, yeah, I know it's unhealthy to chase a guy, and tried to make my friend fix me up with him, I was living in his country and was not far from where he lived. Anyway, this happened in the past, over 5 years ago. I was very unhealthy back then. I had a string of toxic relationships. I had crippling anxiety and self-esteem issues. So when I was chasing Max then, he didn't seem interested in me. He also had toxic relationships to deal with and was also unhealthy. He coped with his issues using alcohol, but he got sober. My friends told me about it, although now I'm not sure that it was true that he got sober. After a while, I stopped being interested in him and found someone nice, but we broke up shortly afterward. After the breakup, Max contacted me on social media and asked me to talk with him over the phone. However, I wasn't at all in a good mental space at that time due to the breakup and a family death I was dealing with. I was really crushed, and I didn't expect Max to message me so suddenly. Anyway, I cut him short and said I couldn't talk to him, but he should contact me later. I truly thought he'd follow up with me later, but he didn't. This was 4 years ago, and since then, he has been silent. 3 years ago, I moved out of the country he was living in. It wasn't the country I grew up in. I moved to his country for studies and to get away from my abusive parents. My mother is a severely covert, narcissistic person. Now I live in my native country. I came back from abroad to live with my mother because I wanted to give her another chance. It was a huge disappointment, but I had to try it. I sometimes think of Max and what could have been between us, and I'm not sure if this is healthy. I also need to point out that he's 45, unmarried, and with no children, and I'm 39, unmarried, with no children. I did say goodbye when I left his country, but of course, there was no response from him on social media. I don't know him well, but from experience I have about men in general and my past relationships, he's not toxic or unsafe. He is, however, unavailable due to his own personal issues. I'm circling things because I'm going to come back and go over this letter. Now that we live in different countries and don't have any contact with each other on social media, he barely uses social media, I'm not sure if something is ever going to happen again. My question is this: is what I feel for him limerence or healthy, mature love? You've talked about limerence on your YouTube, and I trust your opinion on this. Is it worth saving myself up for him? Or should I just bite the bullet and admit to myself that this was a fantasy that I indulged in and I only got crumbs from it? You might ask why I'm holding on to him. Well, we have many things in common. We're both artists, we're both smart, creative, and kind. We have a sense of humor, and we're world travelers. We're friendly, and we love people. We also have similar values: religious, family, work, career, values, etc. And we both struggle in relationships. The difference is that he has accumulated a lot of wealth and I'm poor. Anyway, my fear is that if I let him go, I'll never find anyone like him. The guys I usually meet are boring and have little personality or artistic skills. Max has an incredible personality, which is why I couldn't cut ties with him emotionally all the time. But I feel if I don't cut ties with him, I'll wait for that social media message from him for the rest of my life and will stay single forever. And this is frightening to me. I feel like all this time I've built him up in my mind just because I was scared of putting myself out there and meeting someone new who's available and healthy, who is responsive and does not run from me or ignore me. I have CPTSD due to being raised by my narcissistic mother and unavailable father, and my mind believes that it is safer to stay in the past because at least I know what to expect from it. I know how it will all go. But change is unpredictable and gives me a lot of anxiety. Does this make sense? All the best to you, Anna, and thank you for listening to my story. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, I think you got a case of limerence. So let me see if I can help you go through and see where this is showing up and help you to set yourself free from it. But let's see what you can learn from this. All right. So going back over the letter, I wanted to ask a question about an emotionally unavailable man I have an interest in. It's more like an obsession. So right there, I'm going to say, yes, it's more like an obsession. And this diagnosis of him as emotionally unavailable, I think that might be a misapplication of that. Now, he might be, he might not be. What he is, I'm just going to tell you right up front, he's shown no sign of being interested in you. You got one contact from him on social media, and it sounds like that's the only time he ever indicated an interest in talking to you. All right, so an emotionally unavailable person, usually that would be somebody who you're in a relationship with, and they try to be in the relationship, but they can't love you or they can't be present for you. But this is somebody who's just flat out unavailable. It's not just emotional. He's not there. He's not even in your life. You haven't had contact in 4 years. So this is a big clue that this is a limerent relationship, okay? And then you say he has a public image because he's wealthy. Well, so people who are wealthy probably get a lot more than the normal share of people who are interested in them. And that's something to ask yourself. And sometimes the reason, if he's artistic and wealthy, you're not giving information about him, and I appreciate that. We don't really know. But if he is well known and wealthy for his artistic abilities and he's very visible and known, then sometimes that is a super attractive quality and sometimes could set off limerence. And when people have that highly visible profile, it's easy to feel like we know them, even when they don't really know us. But I get that you were acquainted. So you knew each other through common friends, but never really got to know each other. There was no friendship. So big clue there. There is not even a friendship. You don't actually know each other. When you wanted to pursue a relationship with him, and you say, yeah, I know it's unhealthy to chase a guy. Chasing a guy, trying to get a friend to set you up with somebody, that's not inherently unhealthy. I think it might not be strategic, but it's, that's not the part that's limerent. You were hoping your friend would fix you up. The thing is here, he didn't bite. He didn't respond to that. So whether your friend did anything, he had his chance to be interested in you, and he wasn't. And I know that might be painful to hear, Elizabeth, but I just see no evidence that he is interested in you at all, or was when he had the chance to meet you. This happened some years ago, and I think you're saying it started like 12 years ago. It went on until 5 years ago. And you say you were very unhealthy back then. You had a string of toxic relationships. You had crippling anxiety and self-esteem issues. So yeah, sounds like you have CPTSD. It showed up in your relationships. And when we're in that state, when you're having horrible relationships that are making you miserable and you're having crippling anxiety and your self-esteem is bad, limerent relationships are just delicious. They look so good because you can kind of escape all of this. You can escape the plane where everything's a struggle and imagine this happy relationship where you get your emotional needs met. And I know you're going to be talking about your parents here. And I think that's a huge clue too, that your mom was totally self-centered, couldn't be there for you. Your dad was unavailable. So I see this again and again. I'm learning so much. And it's not it's not like it was unknown to the world or to the people who are professionals in this field, but what happens when you're a kid, I just keep seeing this pattern of CPTSD where somebody wasn't even real to their parents and they become very vulnerable to relationships that aren't real. And if you know what I mean by real, like for parents to see the reality of their kid, they know who you are, they know how you feel, they care about it. They're down there on the floor with you working out problems and helping you understand yourself and loving you and helping you form self-esteem at the same time as having self-awareness to know when you're not sharing your toys. So it sounds like if your parents couldn't do that for you, there's a way that a person doesn't feel real. And I just keep seeing this over and over again. So we're going to talk about how you can become more real. So you were chasing him then, and he didn't seem interested. And I'm just going to say, since it didn't result in any kind of dating or anything, this is the tough love, Elizabeth. He wasn't interested. If a guy is interested in you, he will show up. He will let you know. He'll be present. He'll ask you out. So he wasn't interested. It wasn't just seem. But that's the limerence going, well, there's no evidence that he's interested, but I'm looking for signs. I'm feeling something. We have so much in common. Some people go into magical thinking. They think about in reality, he doesn't realize it yet, but we're, soulmates, or he doesn't realize it yet, but we had a past life together. There's a lot of ways that we trick ourselves into so that we can keep obsessing on somebody because it's giving us comfort in a horrible emptiness. And just like a drug, it can kind of like get you off the hook in the moment, but it ends up leading to greater emptiness down the line. And that's what's happening here. You still haven't had the kind of relationship that made you happy. So let's assume that's the goal here and keep looking at what happened with this guy, Max, in light of that, of how we can help you move towards it. So then you said he coped with his issues using alcohol, and then he got sober, and your friend said so, but you're not sure that he did. Well, so that's interesting. You're obsessing on somebody who has alcoholism, and many of us have done that, but it's just a fact. Somebody who's an alcoholic is very unlikely to be a good partner. Somebody who has, you go on to say he has he has alcoholism, he has toxic relationships, he has issues. So it sounds like even if he were interested in you, the chances of having a great relationship with him are, he's not in that place. But there's the main problem, and that is that he's not interested enough to even stay in touch with you. Okay, that's the main thing. So whether he drinks or not is not even your concern anymore. He's not in your life. So after a while, you stopped being interested in him and you found someone nice, but broke up soon after. Yeah, that's what we do. After the breakup, Max contacted you on social media and asked to talk over the phone. Okay, so there's the big moment you were waiting for, but you were not in a good mental space. You had had a breakup. There was a family death. You were feeling terrible, and you said, I can't talk to you right now, but will you talk to me later? And you thought he would, but he didn't. You haven't heard from him since then. That was 2017. So I would say if you've been kind of pursuing a guy for, 7 years, and he never took an interest, and then one day he calls you, he reaches out and says, oh, give me a call. But when you say you can't talk right then, or you need a little time and he doesn't call back, I would just say, I don't know what that call was, but it wasn't any big thing where he realized that you were the one for him. If he did feel that way, he would have called you back. Because again, if a person is interested in you, and I'm saying this to everybody, a man or a woman, they will let you know. If they're interested, they'll let you know, especially if it's safe to be interested. So the one case where people sometimes keep these things secret is if they don't think you like them. But if you've been pursuing them for years, they know, and they will let you know if they feel the same way. And he didn't. Okay? It's sad, but there it is. And this is good. It's really good. Sometimes just a clear fact is so helpful to set us free so that we can move on and actually have real love, right? So this is a good thing. This is how sometimes the news you fear is the happy news. Because you go, yay, you're free. You're free. You can stop obsessing on a ghost, right? All right. So then you said a couple years after that, you moved out of the country he lives in. You sent a goodbye message. He didn't reply. So there's your 100% confirmation, right? He's not in your life. He's not in communication with you. He could be, but he chooses not to be, all right? So now you're back in your native country, and you came back to live with your mom because you wanted to give her a chance. And it's been a huge disappointment. so you're in your late 30s, and so a couple years ago, you were still in your late 30s. So it's interesting to me that you would make a move for the sake of your mom at that time. But I don't know, that's probably another story. But I get the sense of you kind of traveling around the globe, trying to find the love that's going to help you get your needs met. I mean, your dad wasn't there at all, and she was narcissistic. So yeah, you probably hoped. I get it. Yeah, you wanted love. You wanted love, and that's always what it is. Everything bad I've ever done, everything dysfunctional I've ever did, I I I did because I needed love and I was lonely. So I think a lot of people can relate to that. So it's okay. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. You're showing a common pattern that people get from trauma. So you say, sometimes I think of Max and what could have been between us, and I'm not sure if this is healthy. I think that sometimes thinking of people from the past, there's no problem with that. But when you keep thinking what could have been, I think you have your answer about that. And that's the fantasy. It's just a temptation to go visit this fantasy where you are loved and everything's wonderful with this, and artistically free. And you say you're artistic, and maybe you're just not telling me stuff here, but I'm not hearing anything in your life where that artistry is expressed. And I think that happens too around trauma, is that I believe you that you have artistic ability, but it's kind of hooked onto this other person. Like, if we could just be together, I could set free this gift I have for art. And that's really common, but it's not true. There is a such thing as people who create a life or an environment for you that allow you to set your gifts free, but they're never the ones who treat you like crap. They're never the ones who just don't even return your calls. That would not be it. So then you remind me that he's 45, not married and with no kids. You're 39. So yes, those are marriageable ages. That would be ideal, except let's go back to the main fact. He chooses not to have any contact with you and doesn't know you. Okay. So yes, you said goodbye. He didn't reply. You don't know him well. But from experience you've had about men in general, he's not toxic or unsafe. So Elizabeth, I'm just going to say, I think you should handle that with tender hands, because I mean to say, hold it lightly. That in your past experience, you haven't had good judgment about who's toxic or unsafe. You've had a string of terrible relationships. And so if you're like the rest of us with CPTSD that isn't healed yet, it's just not something you're very good at detecting in advance. It's really common. You didn't do anything wrong. The way that you were raised inevitably almost results in that kind of broken red flag detector. But when you say, I don't know, from what you're saying, there's no evidence that he's not toxic or not or unsafe. And the drinking in particular, I mean, somebody with a problem with alcohol is inherently toxic and unsafe. Now, they might recover, but again, if somebody who you had a relationship with had alcoholism, and you were hoping that they would get sober, if they got sober, that would just be like the beginning of a very long road on the question of, are they a suitable person for you? When alcoholism is active, the answer is no. The answer is never yes with an active alcoholic. It's just a huge barrier to a real happy relationship or having your emotional needs met. That's why alcoholism is such a bummer for the person who has it and the person who tries to love the alcoholic. So it's a challenge. Sometimes people are already married to an alcoholic and they have children and they're invested, and there's all kinds of reasons to then, go to Al-Anon and learn how to live with the alcoholism and find peace, whether the alcoholic stops drinking or not, right? But if this person is not even your friend, I'm just saying, honey, no, don't pursue relationships with alcoholics. Now that we live in different countries and don't have any contact with each other on social media, I'm not sure if something's ever going to happen. No, there's no evidence that anything's going to happen. And even if it did, it would be random, out of the blue, from somebody you don't really know. So I'm going to strongly encourage you to set yourself free from any hope in this relationship so that you can have hope in real relationships. So then you say, my question is this: is what I feel for him limerence, which is obsession with the idea of a person, or healthy, mature love? And I'm just going to say, by definition, this is limerence, because what you're into is the idea of him. You don't even have a friendship with him. It's not possible to have healthy, mature love for somebody you don't know. That could be admiration, that could be attraction, that could be obsession, but it can't be healthy, mature love. Healthy, mature love is by definition a mutual thing between people who know each other, who care about each other, who are invested in the best for each other, who are present for each other. That's healthy, mature love. So let's go with limerence. You diagnosed it yourself. And then you say, is it worth saving myself up for him? Or should I just bite the bullet and admit to myself that this was a fantasy that I indulged in and I only got crumbs from it? There again, you see it, Elizabeth. I know you see it. It is the latter. It's a fantasy you indulged in and you only got crumbs from it. You barely even got crumbs. I mean, one contact. And then when you asked, is it worth saving myself for him? So there's this noble idea of saving yourself for someone, and saving yourself for someone who's actually committed to you is one thing, but saving yourself for a person you don't even really know or have a friendship with, I would say that's more in the category of avoidance. You're protecting yourself. You find it safer to be in the fantasy of future love versus all the difficulty and the slog of actual people love. And I can see why you feel that way, but if you want real love, the path to it is to come back down from the fantasy, back down to earth, back to the real men of the world who you meet, who right now you're judging as boring, but believe me, there are all kinds of men in the world. There are men who have everything that you listed about yourself in common. They have that in common with you too. And they're available for a relationship. And you have the opportunity, you're at an age where it's entirely easy to date men and learn if there is some kind of mutual feeling there that could grow into real mature love. Real mature love takes time to develop, and it's pretty hard to accomplish when you're still in so much pain and self-esteem difficulty and, just the crazy making phenomenon of CPTSD. When you're in that, it's pretty hard to have healthy, mature love, because instead what there is what some people call attachment hunger, right? You're just like, I really want to be attached, can't deal with real men, but there's this guy I don't really know, and I just remember my idea of him, and it's so beautiful, and I want to be in that idea, but it's an idea. So back to earth, back to all of us boring earthlings here. We're not boring. We're actually quite wonderful, colorful, different, interesting, and the reason people seem boring is because right now you're kind of high on a fantasy. And just as somebody, let's say they were addicted to heroin, okay? If they were addicted to heroin and they were hanging around a bunch of people who were spending the holiday together and they weren't high on anything and they didn't drink, they would think that was boring too. In fact, alcoholics think people who aren't drunk are boring. So effectively, some people would call this a form of love addiction, and I'm just sort of going to put a question mark, like, is it an addiction? I don't know. It's an attachment wound. It's an attachment wound. It's certainly, it quacks like a duck. It acts like an addiction. This limerent idea, it's like an addiction. And when you're in your addictive behavior, everything that's not that is going to feel boring. Nothing can seem to get in there. And that's part of what makes it so hard to be in a limerent state, is like you can't taste anything, you can't smell anything, metaphorically speaking, you can't feel anything. No one's getting through, you're not getting through. A huge part of yourself is kind of up in this fog here, where you're imagining the relationship that you might have and you're not experiencing the person who's right in front of you. And so it can be painful, it can be like withdrawal to come back down out of that cloud and just be on earth and start paying attention to people. And usually if the difficulty for you has been with men, then women friends are going to be good. If your mom has been difficult for you, a lot of people with difficult moms don't feel a lot of trust with women, or they don't feel affinity, and they find it easier to be friends with men. And so one thing you're always going to hear me recommend is to find groups such as 12-step programs, because often if you've been in an obsessive relationship, there's often financial catastrophe following that. If you can't be present on earth, well, earning a living is an earth thing. So unless you're independently wealthy, I'm guessing this is an area that's hard for you. So you can go to 12-step fellowships. They're free. There's group therapy. There's ways that you can be together with just women or men and women. But something where there's no possibility of romance, where you can just begin to practice connecting with other people. And practice being real, because that's what I wanted to address. The little bit you told me about your childhood, the narcissistic mom, the unavailable dad, how I see you as somebody, you're having trouble feeling the reality of yourself. You are a real flesh and blood woman. You crave love like all human beings. You want to be loved by a real person who can actually love you, not an idea. And you're just having trouble like connecting that, the reality of yourself to a real person. So you practice real relationships with people. And there's a way back. You practice telling the truth. You practice saying how you really feel, because part of being in a limerent relationship is always kind of pretending you're not as obsessed as you actually are in there. And so there's this way you're always sort of translating how you really feel into something you think is socially acceptable. One of the signs of limerence is that when you talk to your friends about this person you're so excited about, they're always like, they're acting like, oh gosh, we're sick of hearing about this guy, or they're worried about you when you talk about him. They're not quite on board with it. That's a sign. And obviously there would be exceptions, like some friends just can't get behind some love interest. But in this case, 7 years of pursuing a guy and he wasn't interested at all. I'm guessing your friends were sort of like getting a little tired of your quest, right? So pay attention to what people think and become yourself. Start telling the truth. Those friends in that other country, they're not around. Where you are right now, there are people in groups who you can get together with and you can just talk about this. You can say, I feel like I want to go on a date. What I'm worried about is this. Or you can say, I'm having memories about this guy. I would try to avoid social situations or groups where continuing to talk about or think about this guy, Max, is encouraged or tolerated. That sometimes is my unique perspective, and some people don't like it, but I'm telling you, if you want to get over anybody, whether they were actually in your life or that it's a limerent thing, stop talking about them. Number one, stop talking about them. Number two, make yourself stop thinking about them. When you catch yourself thinking about them, say, I gotta stop thinking about that. And give yourself a few go-to things that you can put your mind on. A nice piece of music, a cold drink of water, run up and down the stairs, or some happy memory, something that comforts you, where you can just push your mind instead. It's kind of hard to 100% control your mind, but go in this direction. Just take him off your mind. When they say that phrase, wash that man out of your hair, that's how you do it. You wash him out of your thinking. You wash him out of your thoughts. Thinking about him is you leaving your life. It's you going off. Because it's not just a fantasy, is it? It's kind of like the world of the dead. It's a world where there is no love and there is no interaction. And there is no contact. It's like the world of the dead. So come back, Elizabeth. Come back to the world of the living where we can love you and we can hear you. Okay? So one thing you said that I thought was important here, you said, I feel if I don't cut ties with him, I'll wait for that social media message from him for the rest of my life and will stay single forever. You don't even have ties with him to cut, but the ties that you have with him are mental with the idea of him. And that is, I would totally encourage you to cut those ties. It'll be sad at first, but you'll be surprised how quickly it feels better. It feels like clean. It feels peaceful. To cut ties with an idea that's been torturing you. And that's what I'm hearing. You had said that it's safer to stay in the past because you know what to expect from it. I know how it will go. I just don't see anything safe about being alone for the rest of your life. That doesn't sound very safe at all. Change is unpredictable and it does give you anxiety, and I totally understand it. The future is bumpy and bright. It's both wonderful and scary, and that's a fact. We're all going to get hurt again, here and there. But as you continue to recover and you keep yourself out of fantasy and here on earth, you can start to grow your open-hearted capacity to be solid with 2 feet on the ground and showing love. And that's the kind of person a healthy person can love. And I want you to have a healthy person to love, Elizabeth, and who will love you right back in the same measure. So I hope that helps you. Any loss of a parent can leave an emotional wound on a kid that it can affect you all your life, really. But when the abandonment was intentional and your parent left the family for, someone new and they didn't return, or they only sporadically made contact when it was convenient for them, but not when you needed them, or they totally went away, A pattern gets laid down that can be really hard to break in your adult relationships. How many times have you fallen for someone only to find that you weren't valued? You were being used. You were not treated like a real person. You were the side chick. And then you held on to the relationship anyway. The consequences of this pattern, they don't just go away when you meet the right person, because the pattern actually will drive the right person away before they even get to know you. And I want to talk about how that happens. Now, I got a letter from a 25-year-old woman I'll call Emmy, and she writes, "Dear Anna, I had a crappy childhood which made me hyper-independent but deeply insecure about my looks and self-esteem. My father was pretty much absent, and he and my mom never really had a relationship, but they didn't break up either. He was an alcoholic and died when I was 12. But up until then, the dynamic was that he was coming home to me, my brother, and my mom. He lived in a different town, and he would pick up a random job, usually with my mom's help and connections, and he would stay with us for several months, not giving us a penny, and after that, all of a sudden, without saying anything, he would just leave and go back to his town. My mom let this happen all the time, and I was used to the back and forth relationship they had. And now that I'm an adult, I go to therapy because I need help with this, as I realize the depths in which the whole situation has affected me." So fast forward, Emmy says, to a few years ago, when I met someone at work who I thought would be amazing for me. He was charming, young, smart, and generally cool. I was several months out of my 3-year relationship, which was a fail in its own right, and I was concentrating on my job that I had recently started. One day when I saw this guy, let's call him Noah, I felt as if it was meant to be, as if time stopped and I could only see him at that moment. Soon after that, we went out after work, and it turned out he actually had a girlfriend. And that was the first red flag. But I was too into him, and we ended up secretly hooking up shortly after. This went on for a while, and it was good. We went on dates to the theater, and he treated me like a princess, but he was still in a relationship and didn't do anything about it. It was also his first time ever cheating, and I felt as if I were a horrible person because I let him do this. Late around Christmas time that year, just before my birthday, he said his girlfriend had come to visit him randomly at his university town, and that they were on good terms, and so he just wanted me to know. And I was broken because this meant it was over. Now, after that, we had no contact for 5 months when I received a phone call from him saying that they broke up, and he would like to take me on a date and see where things could go. I still loved him deeply, and I agreed. We had sex on our first meeting. Red flag number 2. He was very clear he didn't want anything serious from me, but my damaged self hoped he would maybe turn to love me if I was persistent enough. Stupid, I know, says Emmy. This hooking up experience, which I thought would turn into a relationship, would continue for a solid year. With this being said, I never got to meet his friends. He would tell me about the parties he went to, but I was never invited. He kept my existence secret from his world, and that hurt me very much, but I coped with it because I thought I would lose him if I pushed for anything serious. Red flag, I know. The last month of that year of hooking up, everything seemed nice and I was hopeful. We saw each other the day before his birthday. I gave him a present I had prepared in advance. He really liked it. The next day he celebrated his birthday, and I was not invited. Then a whole month passed, and he was totally silent. No calls, no messages, nothing. When I would message him, he would not answer for hours. Finally, I saw on Instagram he uploaded a picture of himself with another girl. Clearly, they are together, and I broke down like I've never done before in my life. The girl looks a lot like me, which made me feel even worse because that to me meant that my personality was the issue. All right, some people really don't like the sound of my pencil, but here we go, because this is how I make notes for myself. I really want to come back to that I'm going to read the letter again after this. I had stomach aches for weeks after that. When I messaged him to ask what was going on, he said that he didn't feel obliged to inform me of what was going on in his life. After 2 years of knowing this person, being his friend and sexual partner, he said this. It made me downward spiral pretty badly and triggered my childhood abandonment issues. I unfollowed him on Instagram and Facebook, but throughout the time that passed, I leaned in to message him several times, which I deeply regret. It has now been 7 months since I've seen him, and this happened, and I can't seem to stop thinking about him. It got to the point where I obsessively check on him on social media, fantasize about him, and wait for him to come back again. Rationally, I know this will not happen, and I'm wasting my time and energy, and that I deserve better, but this is my childhood loop of waiting for my dad to return. My therapist describes both my dad and this guy Noah as narcissists and tries to help me let go, but so far I've not had much success. Now we live in the same city and I'm constantly scared we're going to randomly meet and he would be with this girl. Sometimes I fantasize about him seeing me on the street and regretting his decision to leave me. My self-esteem has been totally destroyed and I have developed a fear of men in general. I'm afraid I will remain alone and lonely because of this, and I'm deeply scared. I'm deeply sad and confused, and I know I need to move on, but I have no idea how. Thank you for helping me. I really need help and advice. Warm regards, Emmy. Okay, Emmy, I know how, and I'm going to help you, all right? There is a way, and I'm going to teach you how you can do this tactically, and how you can prevent this from happening again, and how you can make sure that you leave behind all the intense emotions of what happened here. It's going to involve a little bit of tough love, okay? But it'll be said with love, so get ready. Here we go. All right, I'm going through the letter again. Emmy, your childhood, my heart just flies out to you. This is awful. It's just awful. This thing where your parents broke up and got together and broke up and got together and he was never really with you and he came back when it was convenient. I can totally see how that would have affected you. Everything that you're describing just sounds like a really logical wound, like acting on a wound. I get it. It's not that different from how I grew up, too. I understand it very deeply, actually. And then the no money and your mom putting up with it and not doing anything about it because whatever, maybe you understand her feelings as few others can now because you're in the middle of, tolerating that kind of behavior, too, or trying not to anymore. So you met this guy, Noah, at work, and he seemed amazing, charming, young, smart, generally cool. And you were several months out of a 3-year relationship that was terrible. And focusing on your job. So you were like all good, all primed, all that good place that we get to after a painful breakup, but we're kind of, operating really well again. So good. You're in that place, very attractive, I bet. And one day you saw him, and I'm just circling the word saw. All you did was see him, and you got limerence about him. And if anybody hasn't heard the word limerence is the word for an obsession or infatuation for somebody that's not really a relationship. Sometimes there's a quasi-relationship or a friendship or a friends with benefits thing, or sometimes there's no relationship at all. It could be for a celebrity or somebody you once knew. But the sign of it is you'll be looking for signs of hope that you can hold on to. And it can go on a very long time, and it's a horrible, painful way to throw away good years of your life. So we take limerence really seriously here. It's really, really common for people who are traumatized and abandoned and not treated like real people. You were a real girl with real feelings and needs who needed real love and real presence from real parents. So this is not your fault that this happened, but here it is. And a lot of us here, we totally get it, all right? So you had a feeling that it was meant to be. It was like time stopped and you could only see him at the moment. That's the kind of description that we grew up on in pop songs and love stories on TV, but it also is just like classic limerence. Time stops, it's meant to be. It's possible that we could have those feelings with somebody it would work out with, and that's considered one of the ways that limerence can turn out is that the two people actually get together, and then real life sets in and causes the limerence to crumble and fall away. But usually it doesn't end up with two people getting together. It's a little different too than, it has all those signs of what ordinary falling in love is like, which is also kind of magical and, hyper real. But the main thing about it is you're really zeroing in on somebody who is not giving it back to you. That's kind of the main thing. That's what we're concerned about here. Okay. So soon after that, you and Noah went out after work and you learned right away he actually had a girlfriend. So that was the first red flag. And I just circled your use of the word red flag. You mentioned that here. You sometimes say it about yourself. I think you're saying it about him here. But when somebody has a girlfriend and you would like to date them, that's not a red flag. Just for definition here, I want to suggest a different definition. A red flag is a sign that somebody is bad for you. Now, this may qualify as that too. But the fact that he's dating that he has a girlfriend is not a red flag. It's a no flag. It's a no-go zone. It's a barrier. It's a wall. It's a giant fence. He's somebody you can't date because he has a girlfriend. Now, we know that some people end up together because they went in and started dating somebody, secretly. That has happened before, but it doesn't tend to go well. It doesn't tend to happen often. And if you have CPTSD and your attachment wounds are running the show, it will pretty much drive you into a very sad, lost place. And so for those of us with CPTSD, this is what I teach here. We set ourselves a higher standard. We just set ourselves a higher standard. And one thing we don't do is date people who already have somebody. All right. And then you mentioned there that you were too into him and you ended up secretly hooking up shortly thereafter. So that's another thing. If you want to heal from CPTSD, the high standard I suggest you adopt is don't have relationships in secret. Don't go out with anybody where you have to hide it from the people in their life or your life. Okay? And I would, with the exception of maybe like some abuser from your past, that would be appropriate to have that boundary. But nobody with another partner already, nobody who requires you to become a liar. Becoming a liar is so destabilizing for anybody, let alone somebody with CPTSD, because what is that wound? It's a wound to our ability to perceive like what's true and what's real. And you know how when you get involved in something deceptive is you lose track of reality yourself. It'll start to take your CPTSD symptoms and just weaken you. It'll start to bring you down. It's very toxic to have to do anything dishonest. And as a practical matter, who wants to date somebody who lies, right? Who wants to date somebody who cheats? Now, I totally understand. A lot of us have done it here, but I'm just like laying out reality here because I'm on the other side of that. And I woke up and I'm here. I'm just like, no, don't date somebody who cheats. They're not a good boyfriend. They're just not a good boyfriend or girlfriend. Somebody who cheats. And they've just shown you it's more than a red flag. It's a wall. It's a no flag. Okay. So this secret hooking up went on for a while, and it was good, you say lightly. Oh, it's good. It's like, well, I question that word good. I don't think it was good. We went on dates to the theater, and he treated me like a princess. Okay, hold on, Emmy. This is where you're crap fitting. You're compartmentalizing your experience, so you can say, when we were at the theater, he opened doors for me. He bought the tickets. We had a nice dinner. It was like being a princess, except for the part where then he has to hide you from his life and doesn't spend time with you, and you're not invited to his birthday party, and he goes home and he's sleeping with somebody else. Okay, that is not the princess treatment. Not the princess treatment at all. That's treating you as a booty call. Okay, that's the tough love. It's not even friends with benefits because it involves a great big lie. It's definitely putting you in this secret second-rate relationship. And we could talk till the cows come home about what's wrong with this guy. Why is he doing this? And people in the comments are going to want to. But I'll just remind you, he didn't write to me. You wrote to me, and I want to teach you how to get away from him and this kind of thing. From this kind of thing, and how you can head this off so that you just don't you don't get wrapped up in this, because once you go down this road, it just has a way of like binding you to it. It's so hard to get out. It's a lot easier to stay out in the first place, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so he was in a relationship and he didn't do anything about it. So this was comfortable for him to have his public girlfriend and his secret girlfriend. All right, that worked. He was doing something about it. He was juggling it all, and you were making it work for him. All right. You were part of this too. You made that work. You respected this thing where you had to be secret. You continued to answer his calls. And I'm not saying this to be mean or trying to get in your face or anything. I'm just trying to help you, because what happens, I saw, your therapist, what you quoted your therapist anyway is like, oh, they're narcissists. I don't know if your dad and this guy was a narcissist. I definitely hear there's something with your dad. I think this guy's being a jerk at the very least. But our concern is not what is wrong with the other people. Our concern is about helping you take back all your power, all of it, and no longer relying on the belief that other people they're sick and they're going to change, or they're sick and it's their fault. Like at this point in time, if you continue to stay connected to people who treat you this way, now the responsibility has just come 100% into your hands. You are the one who gets to decide whether you date people like this. And I know how hard it is. I know how your mind plays tricks on you, and I'm going to teach you how to support yourself so that you can exercise that power that you have and have always had, that you just couldn't access because of CPTSD. You can access your own power to stay out of trouble like this and to instead save your energy to direct towards somebody who really fits what you want to. Then you say, it was also his first time ever cheating. Maybe, but I have a feeling it's not going to be his last, okay? And I felt that I was a horrible person because I have let him do this. So just from one woman to another, from one person who has had codependent thinking around this stuff to another, the problem isn't that you let him do it. It's not your responsibility to stop him from treating his public girlfriend in this way. It's your responsibility to not do this yourself. So the horrible person feeling is some shame. And the shame, I always make a difference between earned shame and free-floating shame that we just sort of inherit from people treating us badly. But sometimes we do things that we authentically feel ashamed of. And it would be like having a secret relationship with somebody it's wrong. It's just wrong, right? And there is a third party, his public girlfriend, who apparently is being deceived, and you're part of that. Even though the boyfriend, I know everybody's going to be like, no, but the boyfriend, he's the one. Totally. He's the center of the problem, but anybody who goes along with it is corroborating with him. They're being part of the problem too. And that is a bad feeling. And even if you can't acknowledge it in the moment, it's going to be in the back of your mind. You're like, I don't know, I just feel ashamed of myself. So that's a really important piece of healing too, is that learning to get real about anything that you're doing that is earning you a feeling of guilt or shame, resentment at yourself, that you're not living up to your own standards of how to be the good person who you really were made to be and can be and need to be. That it feels good to be your best self. All right. So just I'm validating that feeling you have. It's real. So then you say, late around Christmas time that year, just before my birthday, he said his girlfriend had come to visit him randomly in his university town, and they were on good terms. So he just wanted me to know. And I was all broken up because this meant it was over. So gosh, what an inglorious ending. I just wanted you to know she's here. And you knew it was over. But good, over is a good place to be in this situation because it was tearing your life apart and keeping you out of having any kind of real love. So after that, you had no contact for 5 months when you received a phone call from him saying that they broke up and he'd like to take me on a date and see where things could go. So when I was reading your letter, I was like, oh, see where things could go. So maybe that kind of, cruddy second-rate relationship that you guys had, maybe it planted a seed and he thought, maybe really he really did have feelings. And you say, I still loved him deeply and I agreed. Then you say, we had sex on our first meeting. Okay, I'm going to circle that. You knew I would, right? Red flag number 2, you said. The next thing you say is he was very clear he didn't want anything serious from me. And then, so I'm just wondering, so what does it mean when he says he wants to see where things could go? I'm guessing it just means what? First base, second base, third base, fourth base, right? Where can it go if he's not going to do anything serious? So I guess he was testing the waters to see if you would go back and be a sort of secret friend with benefits. You say your damaged self hoped he would maybe turn to love you if you were persistent enough. And you say stupid, I know. And I want you to stop calling yourself stupid. I would just say traumatized. That's trauma-driven thinking. It's not just you. It's like everybody who got treated like you will go into that thinking and just think, maybe I can earn the love. Because I agree that is probably a vestige of what came from your parents. On the other hand, I don't think it's that helpful to just keep thinking, I act this way, I feel this way because my parents. Like, yes, that started it, but now you're busy creating your own self-traumatizing behaviors. And in time, those will start to take over your life till you can't even remember the original, hurt that happened It'll be what you've done to yourself and how that's accumulating and putting a pattern kind of burned into you. And that's not good. You don't want that. All right. It's really good that you're only 25 and you're willing to change this now. That would be very positive. You absolutely can change the course of your life. And people do it at any age, just saying. But you have the opportunity to not have more relationships like this. And I'm happy for you with that. So tip number 1, in any kind of new relationship or uncertain relationship, or somebody's had no contact and they treated you terribly and they come back, one workaround you can do. Now, your attachment wound is going to say, I'm going to take everything I get. If sex is a possibility, I'm doing that. I'm just running into the fire here. I'm just going to get everything I can and then hope love comes. But that's trauma-driven thinking. It makes sense for a trauma brain, but it's very unstrategic. So if a guy is interested in you, you running towards sex, especially after you've been mistreated, actually cues him. This is true for people of any gender, like you cue another person. I don't value myself. You can do whatever you want with me. You can treat me bad and I will just run towards you and sleep with you. And I know you feel shame about that, and I'm not saying this to shame you. I want you to not feel ashamed about this. I just want you to forgive yourself because you have trauma. You're just like everybody with trauma. And then I want you to adopt a strategy, a set of workarounds that put guardrails on that behavior so that you don't self-sabotage like that. Because I don't think there was any hope for this guy very early on. But when you meet somebody again who you're really interested in, you treating yourself with self-respect, going slow, and if they treat you badly, getting out, that's everything. If you get out, that gets you out, and now you're not in a terrible relationship and you're free to try again with somebody else. But let's say someone was rude to you or inconsiderate towards you. You creating distance in response to that, which is healthy, appropriate, is a signal to them, oh, wait, this is a self-respecting person. This person has boundaries. I better get on my toes. And so a lot of people are not terrible people necessarily. I don't really know about this guy you dated, but a lot of people walk around and they're just following attraction, and they're attracted to people who have a level of mental health and self-respect that they value. And so it's important to have respect, not just for yourself, even though for yourself is the number one reason, but also just consider how people see you when they meet you. So strategic. Sometimes you act as if you have boundaries, even though you don't honestly have them yet. You just want to call the guy. You want to keep calling the guy who's not calling you and chasing him and sleeping with him when he finally gives you an evening. You want to do it, but you have to be strategic sometimes and just make yourself not, because intellectually you know that that's going to bring you down. It's going to cause him to disrespect you. It's going to get you entangled in a terrible situation again. You just have everything to lose by that. So we use guardrails. And it's the same way that somebody who maybe had problems with drinking is going to maybe not hang out in bars anymore, at least for a while until their sobriety is really easy for them. And they're not going to when I stopped smoking, I didn't want to hang out with other people who smoked. I just couldn't do that for several years because I knew if I was around, I would just make that self-destructive decision if it was there for me. So I did a couple of changes. I didn't drink alcohol. I didn't hang out with other people who smoked. And I did this for 8 years. It's a long time. And I think when I first quit smoking, I thought that I would find that impossible to even do a week, but I just did it one day at a time. And then I made similar changes around how I did dating. And it really didn't take long once I made a decision to behave as a self-respecting person in dating, even during moments of crisis when I was just I don't care. I'm just so sick of being alone. I'm just going to run right into the fire. And I stopped running into fires. And it turned out, so quickly did it change the outcome. So I really would like you to look at that. If you want to learn the techniques of how I did it, I teach it in my dating course. The dating course is linked below every video I make. You can go check it out if you want. It's an online course. And then I provide coaching around that as well. So then you said, this hooking up experience, which I thought would turn into a relationship, went on for a year. And with that being said, I never got to meet his friends. He'd tell me about the parties he went to, but I was never invited. He kept my existence secret from his world, and that hurt me very much. But I coped because I thought I would lose him if I pushed for anything serious. Amy, I just want to say, like, you could have written all that about your dad when you were a kid, that you didn't get to be in his life. He just came when he just, needed a little something. Your dad just needed a job. And you put up with it because you thought you would lose him altogether. And that's what trauma-driven thinking does. It stays stuck in that. When you are a kid, like, that will be all the parent love you're going to get. And you take what you can get and you learn to do whatever mental tricks you have to do to just live with it and accept it and feel loved by it and spin it up in your mind as like real love. When you're dating, the job is to stop doing that. Like, that was your coping mechanism. Now your job is to stop doing that, stop crap fitting, stop fitting yourself to crappy treatment and wake up and look what's happening. If you have already lost him, a guy who doesn't even invite you to his birthday, he's not with you. You've already lost him. And trauma thinking goes, well, I better just hold on to this because it's all I'm going to get. But you know what? You're a 25-year-old woman. There are going to be so many chances if you are a 25-year-old woman who treats herself with love and self-respect. That's what it is, and has boundaries. So many new possibilities will open up before you. So I know you know that that's your trauma talking that goes, I have to hold on. I should put up with this. I should never complain that I'm being treated as dirt here. I know you know, and I know it's really hard to change. But here's what you can do. Okay, so when he didn't call you and he didn't reply and you called him, I know you know this, but don't call. You're basically just signing up. You're basically just sending a message saying, please disrespect me. I'm in a bad place. I have limerence. And limerence, for somebody who's not into you, feels like stalking. It's really uncomfortable. It never leads to love. It's pretty awful. And you may have had people do it to you before, and I want you to think about what it's like. So the thing about limerence is, you tend to hide it. Like, when you're in it, you tend to hide it from people because even when your friends hear about it, they're like, oh my God, stop. What are you doing? No, this feels weird. It's very uncomfortable for people because it's coming from a really distorted place. It scares people, that you're doing that. So that's part of why healing limerence means having at least one person that you're totally honest with about what's going on and allowing them to keep bringing you back and saying, yeah, I remember when you did that like last month too. And then, right, that he told you not to call him and he's not into you, right? And you keep having to be told, and not just you, everybody who gets limerent. That's how healing begins. You open up to reality and you quit hiding it like your secret stash of escape fantasy. Like, it's a fantasy and it's basically like a drug. It's like a little thing you're taking a hit off of to cope with life and how scary it is. But I'm telling you, you're ready. You're ready to stop using a fantasy to get yourself through the day. It's now officially causing you more pain than it's giving you relief. And it's blocking you from finding love. And I want you to find love. I want you to have that. And trust me, this is the path. Limerent relationships, this is what you do. You cut off all contact forever. Some people will require an explanation. Not this guy. He doesn't want to hear from you anymore. All right. And you saw on Instagram he was with somebody else. And he likes them enough that he doesn't even want you to be calling. So that's your job, is to take this. Now I wanted to set something straight for you. You said it hurt that this woman looked like you because it meant that your personality is the issue. And you know what? We don't know that. Your personality might be exquisite. It could have been perfectly perfect. The thing that is the number one barrier here is the way you're treating yourself with disrespect. You're a woman who allows herself to be the side chick. I hate that word, actually. I'm sorry I'm saying it, but let's just say it for what it is. It's a horrible role to play. And side chick doesn't get loved. Side chick doesn't get respected. And there are certain people who will use such a person for sex, and they will go to any lengths to keep that person compartmentalized out of their life. So it's not your personality. It's that your trauma wound was making it clear. I don't know, maybe your personality, but I don't see any personality problem. It's that your trauma wound was making you behave irrationally and accept bad treatment. And you were signaling to him that you were a person without worth. Of course you have worth. You were just acting like somebody who didn't. But forget that guy. He cheats. We don't even want him anymore. Okay. All right. So you felt terrible and you tried to message him several times And it's embarrassing. Yeah, I know. We all know it's embarrassing being that person. And now it's been 7 months and you're still thinking about him, and that's what we do. But you may have seen me tell other people this, and a lot of people will not tell you this. But at a certain point, when you can't stop thinking about somebody and you know that you must, and you know that it's best for you, here's what you do. Every time you catch yourself doing it, you make yourself stop. And you never, ever talk about them to other people. Because that's what your limerent urge wants to do. It wants to tell stories. And I used to have this therapist. I just went for years, and I'm just like, and then I had this dream about him, and she'd be like, oh, well, why don't you draw a picture of that? Or let's draw that in the sand, how you feel about that. And I mean, she would have talked to me forever about this. It was finally when my friend who showed me my daily practice techniques, and which, by the way, anybody who wants to learn them, they really help get that excess emotion kind of grounded again. She taught me these techniques, and she was just like, stop talking about it, stop thinking about it. If you have anything to say about this obsession you have, put it on paper in these techniques and read it to me, but I don't want to hear you talking about it. I was like, oh, she's so mean. Oh, it was the most loving thing anybody ever did. So she would only hear about it if she was hearing me read what I wrote, which was these techniques to get free of these fearful, resentful thoughts that I need to be with this person, I'll only be happy, which was irrational. It was totally irrational. So your therapist says it's a childhood loop of waiting for your dad to return. That much is true, but I would just say, you know, I know you still have a relationship with your therapist, so I don't want to mess with anything they're telling you, but my 2 cents is, okay, established, no need to talk about that anymore, all right? You know why you're this way, and the reason it's important to know that is to see that there's a rhyme and reason, and to know it's not your fault, honey, okay? It's not your fault you got like this. But now, this guy, Noah, your dad, none of them, they are no help to you at all. They are toxic influences, and maybe you'll have a relationship with your dad at some point. But all your healing is going to be about you getting in touch with what's going on. And when you start having those thoughts about the ex, you can just say, I'm trying to run away from something. Sit down with your pen and paper and begin to use your techniques to just get real about what is it that's causing you to get scared or angry here. And that's what my techniques do. Anybody wanting to try them, I recommend you can learn it in less than an hour, but use the specific techniques, because if you don't use the technique as taught, it can make you feel more sad, more angry, more scared. So this is a way to get free of the feelings, to get a vacation from them. And you'll find that sometimes the hard feelings come back, but they're a little bit less complicated now. They're a little bit more actionable now. So that can be really helpful. So you're scared, your self-esteem is down, you're afraid you're going to be alone forever. I'm so glad you see that. That's like everybody's core fear with CPTSD, that, you know, if we don't heal, that's what's going to happen. And there's some truth in that, where if we keep pushing away real love, that's what can happen. So it's time, Emmy, it's time. It's your time to heal. And I'm happy for you. And it's not confusing. How to cut this guy out of your life. No contact. Block everything. If you catch yourself thinking about it, stop. Don't talk about him. All right? If your therapist indulges you in talking about it, consider talking to your therapist about what I said and show them this video about why it's helpful to just quit talking about it. There's nothing more to be learned about it. Bring all the talking into how are you going to make your life fulfilling for you today? How are you going to deal with your CPTSD triggers when little things come up and make you feel abandoned? How are you going to deal with it when you feel attracted to somebody? Because you're saying you have this fear of men in general, but you know what? I realize you've been treated badly by men, but you do not have to continue to be treated badly by men. And the person who's going to do that is it's not a magic man who's going to come in and transform that. It's you setting your boundaries in the way I'm describing. All right? You with boundaries. You're going to have a great deal of control over the men that enter your life. So it starts with getting clear about what you want, what you deserve. If anybody watching, if you think that past trauma has affected your romantic relationships or gotten you stuck in limerence, you might want to take my quiz, my dating quiz. It's down below. There's a link to my free tools page on my website, and there you'll find quizzes for different aspects of CPTSD, as well as my free course. And if you open up that description section, you'll also find all my courses and other tools down there that you can use to advance your healing. Now, magical thinking is usually considered a bad thing, but getting PTSD during childhood and going into magical thinking and getting really good at it may just have saved you from having your spirit destroyed. And I want to tell you why I say that. So when bad things were happening and a parent hurt you or abandoned you or told you you were worthless, your little child's mind, if you had stayed present and lucid in those moments, you would have had to absorb that blow. You would have had to take it in. And it's so unthinkably painful that it could have shattered you emotionally and psychologically. And I mean, what parent even says these kind of things? I've heard them do it. It happens. But who would abandon a kid? Who would physically hurt them? So as a kid, you couldn't take that in. Your mind did something incredibly brilliant and separated you and shut down the feelings and hardened that little tender part of you that could perceive reality, that was tuned into the nuance of what everything means and where people are coming from. And it put those parts of you in a safe place, in quasi-unconsciousness. And that's how you dealt with experiences that could otherwise have hurt you even more. So, checking out. Thank goodness that we were able to do that so that there's an intact little spirit in there now, and we have the good fortune to bring this part of ourselves back into the world. It's not always obvious how to do that, and when we make an effort, it can be clunky and inconsistent. And then we keep slipping back sometimes into that checked out mode. And when we do that as adults, people can hurt us. And we get confused instead of angry, and we cling instead of running away. But we can keep trying to keep coming back up out of ourselves and follow that road to healing. That is what it's like. So today I have a letter from a woman I'll call Olivia, and she is right there, like healing, but sliding back into that little place that's unfortunately for her right now pretty negative, but she can't totally see it yet. So I'm going to read her letter out loud and then see if I can help her open her eyes and get unstuck and take one good, strong leap forward in her healing. And here's what Olivia says. Dear Fairy, according to your quiz, I score 100% in CPTSD symptoms, as does my mother. I don't know anything about my father. I've never even seen a photo of him. My mom was an abused child. She was beaten, abandoned, and sexually abused. She was a heroin addict when she got pregnant with me in her early 20s, and my father was a party fling. She decided to go ahead with the pregnancy with me. Long story short, she did give up on drugs when she decided to keep me, and I do believe she did the best she could, given what little she had to work with. Nevertheless, she was not present or fully capable of raising children. I have a younger sister, she says. We were extremely neglected to the point of our basic needs not being met, and I have little memory of any physical affection. We also moved often and struggled financially, which created a general lack of stability. She was a single mom, putting herself through school and working, which left very little time for us. When we were 5 and 7, my sister and I were up before her and riding the city bus to school alone without anyone to prepare breakfast or pack a lunch. We often stole candy from 7-Eleven to feed ourselves. I could go on with the many layers of dysfunction in our family, but I think you probably have a sense that it simply was not healthy or safe for a child. All right, I got the picture. It's coming together now. So that's some background. And Olivia says, now I'm in my 40s, barely scraping by financially, and have yet to experience a true, healthy, stable, and loving relationship. I live with a friend who also happens to be someone I obsessively fell for a few years back when we first knew each other. I became convinced through intense dream and meditation experiences that we were soulmates and mystically bonded. I had no idea I was just one of his many booty calls. He was good looking, the troubled bad boy archetype, and I was living in a fantasy world, thinking that he must feel it too. I can't deny that there have been some very bizarre synchronicities, but this person flat out rejected me to my face, and I kept hanging on to a sliver of hope that one day it would all change. He would see and love me, and we'd live out our fairy tale destiny. Over the past year, we have established a very different platonic dynamic. Though I still feel anxious at times, and feelings do resurface, mainly sadness associated with the feeling of being unwanted and rejection and being on my own. I quit hooking up with him when I set a standard that I would not be sexually involved with anyone who didn't actually choose me, see me, and love me. And needless to say, I've been celibate ever since. I'm renting a room in his house at a very affordable rate because he helped me out of a situation where I had nowhere to go. I'm working diligently on building a business, and he's supportive in that. He also understands what it's like not to have family to back you up, and I believe wants to be there for me in that way. We now play as if we're more like siblings who help each other like family. He refers to me as his sister. He also had a really rough upbringing and is focused on healing. I'm well aware of how messy this all probably sounds, but our relationship continues to improve. I feel that he's been a really tough teacher and mirror for me to see where I'm not well, especially in terms of codependency and extreme people-pleasing in his case. My female friend actually told me that it was looking like Stockholm Syndrome, given the way that this guy was treating me. I'm doing all I can to shed light on that and change the behavior. The main reason I bring all of this up is that despite the positive shift in our dynamic, me accepting that he's not the one, circling a lot. I must look like a mean teacher here, but I'm going to go over this again, and I just want to make sure we talk about some of these key phrases you're using. So accepting that he's not the one for me, though when he's particularly sweet, says Olivia, and he's now more than he ever was, these flickers of future faking do resurface until I talk myself out of it. I have an underlying fear that my dynamic with him may be blocking me from meeting someone who would be right for me. He now has a great girlfriend who's helping him heal and grow, which I would think would help clear the space even more. But I'm basically looking for some perspective from someone who understands CPTSD. I'm happy with my living situation, and I care for him deeply. I'm just curious if maybe I'm not catching a blind spot and would love your input. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I'm very grateful. Olivia, I think when you wrote to me, you've seen enough of my videos to probably guess where I'm going to come from on this, okay? I think that you are in some serious magical thinking. And I'm noticing some phrases here that tend to come from New Age types of disciplines and communities. And you may have seen, I have a video, I'll link it at the end of this one, about ways that New Age myths can be used to manipulate people. And I think that while you're kind of being manipulated here, most of all, you're deceiving yourself. All right? Tough love. But let's go through your letter and I'll tell you why I say that. Okay. First, I heard your background. I don't think anybody who was abandoned at that level, whose mom was a heroin addict, who had to get themselves out on the city bus and eat it and steal candy at 7-Eleven when they're 5, that's just, I totally understand. I understand as few others can actually what that can do to you and how it can distort your perception of what it means to love somebody or be a friend or be a brother and sister. All right. So you're in your 40s and you haven't yet had a truly healthy, stable, and loving relationship. And I think that, you had told me a little more that I didn't read here, but you've been working really hard on yourself. You tend to be a hermit. Some people are really, truly introverted, but a lot of people are hermits because it's triggering to be around people. And so I'm going to guess that whatever your personality is like, people are triggering for you, and you crave a safe space where you know who it is, you know who you're living with, and you can feel kind of safe and taken care of. Being in your 40s and not being financially on your feet, it happens to the best of us, right? But I'm hearing here that this could be sort of a setup for you to be extremely vulnerable and dependent on somebody who is feeding off of your energy, your romantic energy, being in that presence. So I'm just going to go through some areas that I circled one by one and not just jump to what it is I'm about here. Let's build up to this. Okay. You became convinced through intense dream and meditation experiences that you were soulmates and mystically bonded. It's called limerence, and that is something really common for people with childhood trauma, especially people who were abandoned. And limerence is this thing that's something like being in love, but what's strange about it is it involves a whole bunch of obsession. You'll find yourself like just trying to read into every little thing that the other person says or does. There's a huge element of fantasy there. And especially if you're kind of involved in spiritual, new age type stuff, there's going to be some validation for this. that, oh yes, your fantasy about this has some reality to it. But with CPTSD, not all fantasies have reality to it. You can have a vision of what you want for your life, but when you keep imagining that somebody is your special somebody, but they have a girlfriend, they don't want to be with you, then it's a toxic drug that in effect, even though you don't want to be, you're taking a drug to try to numb out what's horrible. And the trouble with limerent relationships is they very, very rarely can evolve into something like neutral and safe. So I'll get to that. All right. So soulmates and mystically bonded. This may really upset a lot of people listening, but I think if you have CPTSD and attachment issues, I would just get rid of the whole idea of soulmates. It's not a helpful concept, and it's a phrase, it's a figure of speech that people use. It also goes along with the idea of twin flames. And if I had $1 for every time people had written to me about how they used to believe in twin flames, which is like where you believe that you're the same soul as somebody, it's just not true. I'm just going to call it. It's not true. It's a form of fantasy, and it can be used to manipulate people. It's a way of convincing people that even though a relationship is just totally awful and you don't get what you want, and maybe you're a side thing or a source of energy or romantic validation for somebody, that it all means something. It's a way that people get hooked in to bad relationships. So that's why I'm just calling it. All right. So then in your letter, you said, I can't deny there have been some bizarre synchronicities. Okay. So there's a couple things you say here where I can tell you're not platonic. You're still in it. The magical thinking is there, but you're fighting it. You're sort of like, I'm trying to accept that we're just friends and I'm living in his house and he has a girlfriend, but there are these bizarre synchronicities. Later in the letter, you say, I'm trying to accept that he's not the one for me, but when he's particularly sweet, and he is now more than ever, these flickers of future faking do resurface until I talk myself out of it. So I think you mean you future fake yourself. And for anybody watching, future faking is when somebody manipulates another person by saying, it's going to be so great, baby, we're going to get married. And they do this like when you barely know them. And if you're very vulnerable, you go along with it and believe it. And future faking, I'd say that when people say, you know what, I think that we're soulmates or we had a past life together, that is a form of future faking. It's sort of trying to trick somebody into thinking there's something there, but there's no intention to follow up on it. They may occasionally think they intend to follow up on it, but future faking it's connected to a lot of narcissistic behavior and manipulative behavior where somebody is just trying to get what they want. So you know that word, but if you were applying it to him, I don't know if he's future faking. I think you might be future faking yourself is what I'm saying. Okay. So then you say that there are bizarre synchronicities, but, and here you come back to reality, this person flat out rejected me to my face, and I kept hanging on to a sliver of hope that one day it would all change. He would see and love me, and we'd live out our fairy tale destiny. All right, so when you say fairy tale, I know you're being ironic and you're being silly, but I know what limerence is like, and it is a fairy tale. That is what's going on. It's a pretend story and it's a fantasy. It's a form of escapism. So, trauma reactions, it's like fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And when you go into fantasy, it's a form of flight. You're escaping. Reality is too hard and too painful. And there's these little reminders that something's terribly wrong and change is going to be required. And change is scary. And so it's just like, whoosh, I'm just going into this fantasy. Because really, this is going to work out. There is no writing on the wall that this is going to work out at all. All right. So I'll just be the mean old fairy who tells you that. This is not going to work out. But right now, you guys kind of have an agreement that you get to stay there and fawn on him, think that he's really special and great and helping you. There's a lot of language of helping here. You did say it's almost impossible to be yourself around him because you're so nervous. And that is, that's just one more sign, like, that this is not like a good relationship. A good relationship, whether it's platonic or romantic, means you can be yourself with somebody. You're not afraid to be yourself. But you know what happens, Olivia? What we do is we stop being ourselves, because being ourselves would make it all too painfully obvious that this is like, it's like a cat walking on the piano keys, right? It's just, it's not, something is really discordant. It's not working. There's no harmony here. And so you're cramming this belief system in that somehow it's okay. Well, you know what we call it around here? We call it crap fit. And that's what we do when we got so good as kids at fitting ourselves to crap. Now, I bet when you were at 7-Eleven stealing candy with your sister, I bet you guys were so good at looking like good little innocent girls, right? And you were good little innocent girls. I mean, kids got to eat, right? You were good. But I bet you learned to start putting out an exterior version of yourself for other people to see while you get in there and was like stealing, candy. And having grown up kind of poor and neglected myself, I just know there's a lot of shame involved. It's a lot of shame. And a person can get a very strong need to sort of cover it up. And when you get so good at that, when you get so good at covering up your shame, that's crap fit. And if you don't heal that, see, that's a beautiful adaptation to cope with being a little kid and not having food. In your 40s, becoming dependent on somebody where you can't be yourself and pretending that there's like some sort of magic to the whole thing, that is the same thing. It's the same survival technique, only now it's not helping you survive. It's sabotaging your ability to survive. Like, this is a fragile situation. And for you, a wonderful next step in your life would be to heal from your trauma. And to heal from trauma, most of the time, we really need to be like in kind of a peaceful, safe space where we're not getting triggered all the time. So then you say, over the past year, we've established a very different platonic dynamic. And I'm just going to say, I think he's established a platonic dynamic or a platonic boundary. The dynamic sounds like it's still very much romantic. Though I still feel anxious at times and feelings resurface, mainly sadness associated with feeling unwanted, rejection, and being on my own. Oh, I mean, I know I don't need to tell you this, but you see the parallel of where you were as a child. And now there you are again, rejected, abandoned, on your own, and trying to hold on. Olivia, you're stealing candy right now. That's really what's going on. You're not getting food and you're stealing candy. And you describe here, you feel sad. You say, I quit hooking up with him when I set a standard that I would not be sexually involved with anyone who didn't actually choose me and see me and love me. So I'm proud of you for doing that, to stop having sex with him, but you had to set the standard. Like he says, I don't have feelings for you. I'm flat out rejecting you, but I will keep having sex. I'm taking a lot of letters about this recently because I want to talk really strongly on your behalf and say, so long as you are entangled in relationships like this, it won't be enough to not have sex. If you're living there, if you're sad all the time, if you're abandoned all the time, it's like you have a wound, right? And you just keep like scraping it off. The scab is off and it's bleeding again and again and again every time it hurts you. How are you going to heal with that going on, right? But I get you. I think you're scared. I think you're really, really scared that you can't make it. So you said, I'm renting a room in his house at a very affordable rate because he helped me out of a situation where I had nowhere to go. So, you wouldn't be the first person who had to live in a difficult situation because you had nowhere to go. But this has been going on a year, and you're saying that you're working on building a business and he's supportive. I'm going to suggest something like that, sort of flat, is maybe more advice than you want. But building a business to get out of there sounds like a recipe for vagueness, and that for the short term, getting a job is what would get you out of there. Getting a job is what would get you out of there. And it's possible to build your business while you have a job. I did. I built up my business as a single mom, and it takes a lot of energy and focus, but you can do that. A job would bring in immediate income and not have to, bring some business to fruition. He also understands what it's like not to have a family to back you up. And I believe he wants to be there for me in that way. He's not a family. Him saying that and him being there like a sister, that's not a family. Okay? This is not your family. This is a guy you used to have sex with, who'd like to still be having sex with you, who's having sex with somebody else, who doesn't love you. And so I know your family of origin was very much like that, where you were not loved. But I want you to have that. If you want to stop having the suffering right now, you're going to need to make a conscious decision to stop having these crap fit relationships. It's so hard. I know, because it means walking away from the only family you know right now. It feels like the only thing there will ever be. And I know that you've been through a lot, and that could feel really destabilizing. So there might be a period of transition coming up, and I'll talk about that. One really big red flag I saw here, you're saying the relationship is improving. And what I'm hearing is that you're getting better and better at stuffing and hiding how you really feel about it and how hurt you are and how much this is paralyzing you moving forward in your life with being able to actually find a real relationship or get on your feet financially. And you say, I feel that he's been a really tough teacher and mirror for me to see where I'm not well, especially in terms of codependency and extreme people-pleasing in this case. Those words, teacher and mirror, for a manipulative and sad relationship, that's where I was like, you're into some new age stuff, I think, right? Because that's a hallmark of it, a tough teacher and mirror. And those are put forth towards people who are being manipulated as a justification for saying, sure, this makes you feel humiliated and empty and sad and unable to function. But I'm your teacher. I'm a tough teacher. This is not teaching you anything. It's sucking the soul out of you, okay? I'm just going to say it really strongly because you wrote to me and you know what I'm like, right? I care very much about you. I relate to you too. And the mirror to show you where you're not well. Well, have you seen enough, Olivia? I'm just going to say that with great directness. Have you seen enough? You're not well. You have codependence and extreme people-pleasing. All right? You're fawning. That's a trauma reaction. And you're sacrificing any opportunity to care for yourself and take care of your own life and be fulfilled and heal yourself to try to make it feel okay for him to do whatever he's doing. Your friend says it looks like Stockholm Syndrome. I'm with your friend. It looks like Stockholm Syndrome. I don't think he's abusing you directly. I think he is a selfish person who is saying what he wants and you're agreeing to it. So in his mind, there's no problem here. And we get letters all the time where, one party says, I don't want a relationship. And the other person says, well, I can put up with that for now, but it could be a relationship in the future, right? And they're like, oh yeah, maybe, Well, I think that's morally wrong. The manipulative person we can tell ourselves that we got consent and it's mutual, but it's not. We're taking advantage of someone who needs love so bad they will say anything to keep us from leaving. So that's what I have to say about him. And then you say, so you're accepting that he's not the one for you, although you still keep getting this idea, these flickers, right? And I'm just telling you, so long as you're in this guy's presence, you're going to see flickers. He's somebody you were attracted to begin with. He's somebody who has no compunction at all about having somebody he was sleeping with, would sleep with now, and a new girlfriend all in the same space. Like that works for him. And maybe it works for his new girlfriend. I don't know. Maybe this is actually really horrible for her too. And you might want to consider that as well. But I don't know. She is helping him heal and grow. Oh, so he's really good at getting women to help him and heal him and help him grow. This is starting to make me mad because you had said he's a tough teacher to show you that you're codependent and extreme people-pleasing. So healthy adults, they don't heal each other. Okay, there are rare instances, I think, where a broken person ends up with a very profound friendship with somebody who ends up being a spouse, and there was some sort of like assistance with healing there. That could happen, but that's not what's happening here. He's not healing and growing. He's having a great time. That's all. But he's praying that when you tell a person who's vulnerable and codependent that they are healing you and helping you grow, that's how you give them their fuel to keep them around. And so a lot of what I'm guessing this is a kind of like a narcissist codependent dance here, where the narcissist gets that, adoring energy and the codependent gets to feel like they're healing and growing or having a tough teacher, a mirror. And all of it is completely destructive to your life. So I'm just calling it out. All right, I'm calling it out. So you say, I have an underlying fear that my dynamic with him may be blocking me from meeting someone who would be right for you. So Olivia, here's the thing I want you to really take in here. If you were to meet the person who's right for you, they would not want to be with you because your energy and your heart are just so entangled with this guy. He's running the show here. So a healthy person does not want to get involved with somebody who has that kind of confusion and entanglement. You know what they want? They want someone who takes care of themselves. They want someone who has self-respect and who wouldn't dream of trying to help and heal or have a tough teacher that causes them pain, but who takes positive steps on their own behalf. That's how healthy people behave. That's what they're looking for. Until we heal, or at any stage of our healing, the relationships that we end up with are usually a reflection of where we are ourselves. And so right now you're in something that's a little more like a transactional relationship. I'll give you this if you give me that. So he gives you security. You give him the, adoring energy that he wants. And that's transactional. That's not right. That's not love. And I get it. He's your friend and he's encouraging and supportive. But I'm just saying, you can do so much better. You can do 20 times better. But you're going to need to heal first. I don't think that you're going to go out of the frying pan and into a wonderful relationship. There's this fire that you have to walk through first. And so jumping into a relationship from here would be very likely to have a similar dynamic or something just as unpleasant and destructive for you. And I don't think we have 9 lives on this. Maybe we have 9, but we don't have 20. And so every time that we get completely spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, functionally, financially invested in somebody and the whole thing falls apart, it's like something gets torn off of us and we can't totally heal that. And we walk into the next thing with some wounds from that. And if this happens again and again and again, I've heard it called a piece of cardboard where, cardboard gets glued together and you pull them apart and the outer layer of the cardboard gets torn off every time. And soon you just have this flimsy kind of piece of brown paper with holes in it and chunks of glue. That's what it feels like, right? So the object of the game here is to stop bonding with these, with these pieces of cardboard. Stop bonding, start to heal yourself. And, I think one of the problems is that everybody says that, but nobody knows how to do it. I know how to do it. That's what I'm teaching here. I do know how to heal. I can teach you what I did, all right? If you ever want, go check out all my courses or my membership. That's what we do here. We get real with each other. We use tools that help to come out of the bad dream of what we think we have to put up with and all the anger and all the grief that drives us into trauma-driven lives and decisions. Okay, so those courses are down below in the description section. So you were thinking that he has this girlfriend and that would help clear the space even more. So I see what you mean, that sometimes when you are pining away for somebody, when they're with somebody else, it kind of helps you face up to the reality. But in your case, it's not. You're still pining away. I don't think you're at a place where you can deeply consider other people's feelings, but for reference, hanging on to this guy with all your romantic energy for him when some other woman is in a relationship with him is undermining to her. If you were to accept that you're not with him and just let them experience whatever relationship they were going to have, it would probably be better for everybody. And I'm going to guess, it's not going to work out for anybody probably, but I don't know. I don't have eyes for the future. But I know for you that hanging around that relationship is not clearing a space. And even those words, clearing a space, just remind me of that New Age manipulation. It's it's okay, he can bring her in. It's not crowding the house. It's clearing a space, right? I just think it's BS. I'm mad at him for you. And I want to help you face this and get out. Okay. But, all right. So I'm looking for some perspective for someone who understands CPTSD. So there you have it, Olivia. That's my tough love. So here's what I would suggest to you, if you can handle it, is take a period of time, because I'm guessing that it would be very destabilizing for you to move on and you don't have the money right now. But let's say 3 months to go get a job, start saving up some money and get ready to have enough money to get a deposit on your own place to live, maybe with housemates. And for people with CPTSD, and especially for you as a hermit, I realize housemates might be tough. So maybe a studio apartment, something very small, you know, what they call in England a bedsit. It only needs to be small at first, because when you heal, your personal ability to direct your life and do things like get a better job, it just starts getting easier and easier. And one thing about about being single is it pushes you out of the house. So some things that you might want to do is get yourself out there to things that don't cost money, that connect you with people who are also interested in healing. And I'm going to suggest 12-step communities. There's no money involved. You know, you can donate a little bit of money if you want, but there's no money involved. There's no authority, and there's nobody who can come in and romantically take advantage of you, and in exchange for some kind of position or advancement in the organization. And that's not to say that vulnerable people don't have flings. But for you right now, celibate would not just mean not having sex, but not getting emotionally connected and entangled with a man right now. So you know who that leaves? Women. And if you're like a lot of us who had tough mothers and who tend to be attracted to manipulative men, you may not have great relationships with women. And I would just say, just let that be your number one priority. Women friends in 12-step meetings. Everybody qualifies for one or another. And one thing for you, you definitely qualify for Al-Anon. That was my safe space when I first needed somewhere to go to get away from all the toxic stuff I was involved with. And it was fantastic. And I met wonderful people who were working hard on themselves or who needed support. And I was able to, you know, be somebody who could listen to somebody else and support them and ask how they were doing. That was a growth experience for me. That was a mirror. It was not a tough teacher. It was a pleasant, lovely, warm bath with roses in it of a teacher. How about that, right? Get that kind of teacher. And, you know, I think right now as I'm recording this, there's not always infinite in-person meetings to go to. I don't think that limerence is always an addiction. I think that it's a close enough description of what it is. When we have childhood PTSD, there's stuff going on there that are like wounds, like psychological wounds. But for practical purposes, you might as well teach it as an addiction. So there's also programs for people who have love addiction, where you can also get support for separating. And I just encourage you to stay out of environments that are really conducive to you getting to feed off your energy from validation and kind of fatherliness from men. If it's genuinely fatherliness, not somebody where there's any kind of attraction, that could be kind of a nice thing for you to be around. And find the people who are safe for you. And safe people are people who are not seeking a romantic or sexual relationship with you. And they're people who want the best for you, right? So one thing about being in the meetings is that you can get a second opinion from your newfound friends when you go looking for a job. And there's a type of job that people who have this kind of vulnerability are very vulnerable to, and that's to go work for yet another, usually man, who wants to suck that adoring energy. It doesn't, you know, it may not be a romantic type of thing, but who wants to suck that adoring energy out of you in return for, you know, a pretty low wage. And because of your experience people-pleasing and codependence, you would be obliged to accept that. You would sort of get back right into that same mind F that you are living in right now. So basically any job can get screwed up through exploitative relationships and entanglements. And that is one of the attractions of self-employment. And I know that that's a goal for you. And you can set out that goal and you can begin that on a small scale. But just to get money coming in right away, I would recommend a really straightforward job where you do something that needs to be done. At the end of the day, you clock out, and it's never about some complicated dynamic with a boss or, you know, appearing with them at parties or listening to their problems or anything like that, like a super clean, straightforward job. And something that comes to mind is stocking shelves in a grocery store. Editing video, that may not be a skill you have, but that's a skill that I developed and I loved it because it's a service that you can do without getting any kind of entanglement with people. You can pass things over online. But online jobs, the one limitation is you're not going to be around people. And one way or another, I'm going to encourage you to have a balance of being with people and having some time to rest and recover as a person who feels inclined to be a hermit. You want to be with people and you want to rest and recover. I have a lot of courses that help with the relationship part, the calming your triggers part, and the connecting with other people. So if you're interested, definitely check those out. They're always beneath the videos, but you can keep coming back here while you're saving money. Watch these videos for free and go take my free course, The Daily Practice. It helps calm symptoms. And people who take that course are invited to come to free Zoom calls with me twice a month where we use the techniques together and I take questions. Maybe I'll meet you there. I would love that.